Wait,
done deal.
you know someone?
I'm sure when you're around in New York. So that's the first time I've paid attention to a KU to say that.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. How are you? Good? Are we staying warmer than before? Yes? Who's going somewhere really awesome for spring break? Are you going anywhere awesome for spring break? No? Where are you going? Are you staying here? Yeah.
I didn't hear you.
Oh, okay. So you're not staying here in town?
No.
Okay, I'm staying here in town, so I think Manhattan's awesome, but anyone going on a cruise or somewhere really warm? No? Good. I like you all better because you're not doing more fabulous things than me. But great. Today we have an excellent panel. Is it the camera ready to go? Nope. Okay, I'm gonna keep stalling a little bit. But can I quickly? Are you good? Okay. All right, I'm going to run through attendance really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Is Logan here? Yes, hello, Logan. Aiden. Aiden.
Really pressing down.
Rachel. Isaiah. Justin. Kendra. Bernard. Brian Gilbert?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Shaylin. Andrew. Kate. Josh Parker. You're Josh. Okay. There are 4 Joshes in this class. Max. Here. Sydney. Here. Josh Reed. Jared Schmitz. Nope. Chloe. Connor. Okay. Stratton. Hallie. And Sierra. Oh, right here. You're right there. Okay, sorry. Okay. If I didn't call your name, it's because I know you. Oh. And I remember your name. And then you're going to go. Okay. Anything else I should? Sure. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
If you want to use this one, it's great. It's
Oh,
good. So that'll
okay.
just be,
Oh, nice. Okay. Sweet. Okay, welcome to our last MC010 class before spring break. We have our lovely panel of people who are experts in writing and editing who are also graduates of our program. The Zoom card is in the back this week because we don't have a Zoom guest, but we are recording this for our online section of MC010. Questions about any of that? Okay. Great. How was the media meetup last week, by the way?
Good.
Yeah? Do we all have fabulous jobs already? Good. Wanted to... No? Did any of you get interviews or follow-up questions? Yeah? That's good news.
I told me to send you my resume.
Did you do it yet?
I have not.
You have not?
I
Okay.
haven't, I'm waiting to update it.
Okay, that makes sense. And so if you need resume help, cover letter help, let me know, let Sarah know. Please do follow up if people asked you, like they did to Tyler, because we want you to follow up on those connections. So without further ado, would you like to introduce yourselves? Marissa, do you want to start?
I'm Marisa Larson. I graduated from K-State with degrees in broadcast journalism and political science. For a very short time, I was an on-air TV reporter covering the State House in Topeka for just a couple of years. Then I joined the Peace Corps, was in Morocco for 2.5 years, and went pretty much straight from there to National Geographic, where I was the Middle East editor for 12 years. And then left there and came back to Manhattan, Kansas, from Kansas originally, and I'm the editorial manager at the KSU Foundation. So I'm in charge of our magazine that we put out twice a year, and making sure we have stories up on our website. I manage a small staff of writers, mostly student writers, so if you ever want to and we tell the story of philanthropy at K-State.
And I'm Tim Schrag. I graduated from K-State with a degree in journalism and digital media in 2012. After that, I worked at the Hutch News, first as a copy and design editor. I did sports fronts and front page spreads, obits, a little bit of everything. Then for about 2 years, I transitioned to a reporting position at the Hutch News and was kind of primarily responsible for their social media presence. And then finally, in 2015, I returned to K-State to work for the K-State Alumni Association and be the editor of their quarterly magazine called K-Stater. You can get a copy right here, and there's plenty of copies over there that you can come check out. It's a public relations magazine that kind of delves into K-State news from an alumni perspective. So we spend time teaching K-Staters, K-State grads, prospective students, things they might need to know about K-State currently and what our alumni are up to, what they're doing, what they're achieving, those types of things.
I'm Jason Tidd. I graduated 2 years ago with a print journalism degree. I was the editor of the Collegian while here, and afterward I did an internship in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Times. I also did an internship with my hometown newspaper, which would be a great place for any of you to get internships. And after that, I went to a small town newspaper and was there for a few months before moving to Wichita, where I'm the evening breaking news reporter for the Wichita Eagle. So I cover a little bit of everything. I do some crime, I do some government meetings, sometimes go outside of the city when there's bad weather, like a tornado. I'd be the one who goes to the city that gets hit.
All right, fantastic. So I thought we would start with just asking some general questions, and then we'll go ahead and start asking individual questions. I want to remind you that if you want to ask a question that you didn't think of when you were doing the discussion board, you can go ahead and jump in. This shouldn't be just all them talking. If you would like to talk, please feel welcome to do so. So one of the things that they've been prepping for and they just practiced was networking. Can you talk about how you use networking to get the positions you have now, or tips for networking, maybe if they're not really extroverts and they don't know how they should go about that process?
So networking is highly important. I'm an introvert. I have to push myself to go out there and talk to people, but my big recommendation is ask for whatever you want. No matter how crazy you think it may be, no matter how big. I mean, that's how I ended up at National Geographic. Because the worst thing people can do is say no. You're fine if they say no. But honestly, I mean, I got my job at National Geographic partly out of persistence. I had tried to get internships there, I did, and all this stuff. And then when I was in the Peace Corps, at the end of my 2 years, I picked a producer's name out of the credits of a National Geographic documentary, sent him a letter, said, hey, just would love to chat with you sometime when I get back to the States. And he answered back and said, sure, you're my number, just give me a call. And from there it worked into a job. So it's really just, go for what you want, be persistent. Networking is definitely important. Reach out to your connections, their connections. It doesn't matter if it's 6 degrees of separation, go for it.
Yeah, I think networking is really important and crucial. When I was a senior, I started applying for jobs all over. I think I put an application in every single state, just about. Cast a pretty wide net. And then over spring break, my mom saw an opening for the Hutchinson News, which is like 30 minutes from my hometown. I was like, nope, not going to do it. So what I did was I called them rather than emailing, because nobody ever returns those kinds of calls, thinking, there's no way. They're not going to call me back, and then when my mom asks, I can say I tried. Well, they called me back, and so I had to go down there and do an interview, and I interviewed for a reporting position and didn't get it. They felt that they wanted a different grad with more experience. So they hired a KU grad that had like a semester of like working in KPR. So whatever you want to call that for experience. But anyway, they felt like my resume and skills were strong enough that they called me back like the next week for a copy editing position. And so I went and took it, and that got me a lot of experience in the editing side, which I thought really helped my writing. But how I landed my job here at K-State is while at K-State I was working for this magazine as a freelancer, and the longtime editor, who's also named Tim, happened to run across me when I was up for a visit in Manhattan and said that the guy that had replaced him after he had retired had just left his job, and that if I wanted to apply for that job, he'd put in a good word for me. And, well, when your college mentor tells you to do something, you do it. And the rest is kind of history.
So the first internship I had while at K-State, I went into my hometown newspaper where I had delivered newspapers as a kid and went to the editor and said, hey, I am a journalism student at K-State. I want to write for you. I wasn't sure if they would even take an intern. They had never had an intern before. I was their first one. It was such a great experience because as a student I was getting a professional who had done this her entire life, looking at my stories, telling me how to improve, showing me other ways of doing things. And then for my current job, I found out about it because my girlfriend also works at the Eagle, and she's also a K-State grad. And she found out that there were openings there. And one area where networking can really help is not all openings are advertised. Sometimes you hear about them from word of mouth. So I heard about it from my girlfriend, and I applied and had an interview and got hired. And I know that the Eagle has an internship where a donor pays to have a student from K-State intern there every summer. So not that I have any influence on that, but the editor there does ask me, hey, have you heard of this name? And I had. So the student who will be an intern this summer, I knew. And that's another area where networking can help, is with getting your internships and with people who have been students here and the older students who you might work with through student media, being at the places where you might want to work one day.
Yeah, good. Questions, follow-up questions about that at all? No? Okay. Can we ask individual questions? Are you ready for that? Or are there other things that you want to go? Okay. One of the questions I'm interested to find out is, this is from Marisa, what 3 things do you think that sponsors look for in a university like K-State when choosing to donate, and what does K-State offer back to them, and then how do you tell those stories through the publications that you work with?
What we find is most often donors want to feel like their financial gift, their investment, is making a difference. And so they especially, like if it's a student, they like a scholarship, they want to hear back from the students who get those scholarships saying thank you because of the scholarship that I was able to do X, Y, Z. Or if it's faculty support, same type of thing. You know, thank you because of your investment. I was able to do some preliminary basic research and use that research to apply for a grant, which then got me a $2 million grant. So they like to feel like they're making a difference. They want to hear how their money was used and what impact that it has had. So my job is at the foundation is we tell those impact and philanthropy stories. So, and then we put them out, you know, through our website, through our magazine, social media, and all that stuff. So to let donors know that yes, their money is being invested and spent well, and the results of those investments, and how it's bettering students' lives, K-State in general, and then society as a whole based on like the research and stuff that's being done through those investments.
Okay, this one's for Jason. Also very interested. This is personally selfish. What's the best barbecue joint in Wichita? And what is your favorite part of being a reporter in that city specifically?
I actually have only been to 2 barbecue places in Wichita.
Okay.
My girlfriend is a vegetarian.
Oh.
So, but my favorite restaurant is Bricktown, where I do get barbecue.
Yeah?
And it's only about 1.5 miles from where I live, so it's great. And I go there to watch K-State games a lot.
Okay.
Best part about being in Wichita, I think with being in such a large city compared to the rest of Kansas, you have so much competition with other media as well as so many reporters at the Eagle. So there are so many older reporters that I can learn from, who when I have a question I can go ask them, and it goes both ways. Sometimes they might learn something from me, but more often it's me learning something from them. And there are 3 TV stations and 2 radio stations that frequently cover news, and since I'm covering breaking news, I'll go to the scene and there are 3 TV stations there, and I hear what questions they are asking, and I can ask my own questions. I can learn from what they are doing. When right after the police spokesman speaks, they're now doing their live shots. I'm hearing exactly what they are saying on camera, and I can hear what angle they are taking for the story, and know, hey, maybe that's something I didn't think of, or I think I have a much better angle, or as I am writing, I can know what I should be looking at.
Yeah, good. Connor, didn't you ask that question? Yeah, that's good. No one has ever asked what's the best barbecue in Indy City for alumni panels, so you can ask them about food if you want. So I guess that's something. Do you guys have comments on best barbecue in Manhattan?
Oh, I was going to ask you.
Oh.
So do you remember back in December of 17 where they had the swatting incident?
That was the month that I started, and I do remember it. I was supposed to be working that night, but I was off. So they called in somebody else to go to it. So I missed out on that story, but I did write follow-ups on it.
I'm still curious about how that case is going through the court system right now, because obviously we did pass some new laws about that and everything.
So there were 4 key people with it. There was the police officer who fired the shot,
Right.
and he was not charged with any crime. There was the California man who called in the fake 911 call, yes, Tyler Barris, and he has pleaded guilty to swattings across the country. I think his sentencing was supposed to be last week, but a different trial took long, so it was moved to, I think, next month. He's facing several years in prison.
There are multiple associations.
Can you give them some context for people that might not know
Yes.
about it? Okay.
So December 2017, Wichita police were called to a report of a man who had shot his father in the head and was holding his mother and sisters hostage and was threatening to burn down the house. Police get there. A man steps out on his front porch, and police, thinking this is the person who made the call, tell him to put his hands up. He does, and then he reaches back down, and police think that he's reaching for a gun in his waistband. He starts to pull his hand back up, and a police officer who was told to cover the other officers in the area took a shot and killed the man. It ended up being that nobody at that house made that 911 call. Somebody in California did, and they did it as part of a swatting connected to a Call of Duty game over a $1.50 wager, I believe. So this has led to new laws to increase penalties for people who make fake reports to 911. The man who made that fake call has now been charged and pled guilty to multiple swatting calls across the country.
How many charges?
I think 50-some.
Jesus.
And his sentencing is supposed to be next month. And the 2 gamers who were involved, one of them was from Ohio, one of them was from Wichita. The Wichita person gave his old address to the guy in Ohio when they had their dispute. Both of them have been charged with crimes. They have both pleaded not guilty. One of them, it was news just this past week that he plans to change his pleading. We don't know what he will change it to. The other one's case is still going through court right now.
And so did they know each other at all?
Only through video
Only
games.
through video games. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
All for
Yeah.
I think one of them had accidentally killed the other and they were on the same team.
But yeah, so I was wondering about that. I was wondering if you covered that story. They answered my question.
I covered a little bit, but not the main breaking portions.
To kind of build on that, do you two want to talk about maybe a story that has had the most impact on your career so far, or one that you will never forget, maybe?
Well, there's been a lot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I've been doing this longer than you all have been alive. And working at National Geographic, we don't do late breaking stories. The difference there is it takes on average a year to produce a story from concept to print. I mean, it's the magazine's at the printer 3 months before it hits your coffee table, because it's such high quality printing. It takes a long time. So the thing at Geographic is coming up with stories that seem timely but are timeless. Actually, the story that is probably most memorable to me is one that never actually ended up in a magazine, and that was part of the issue. We worked on it for 3 years, and it was my story idea to look at, and this was before the Arab Spring happened, and my suggestion was that National Geographic always covers mummies and such in Egypt. But I said, we need to cover what is happening to modern everyday Egyptian, because life for them is really horrible, and they're not going to put up with this forever. And so I convinced our editor-in-chief that we should do it, but all through the whole process I kept saying, but you have to keep in mind, if we do this, we're going to make the Egyptian government people mad, and they may not give us the visa permissions to come in and do the mummy stories anymore. And he's like, I know. So, they hired a writer, a photographer, they recorded it, we researched it, we edited it, whole time talking through everyone at National Geographic Society. So magazine, TV, everyone knew this was happening. This was going on for like 3 years. Finally, it was ready to go to print, and the TV people got cold feet and convinced the editor-in-chief to pull it, because we wouldn't be able to do our mummy stories. And then like a year later, the Arab Spring happened. And I was like, told you.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
So what did you do? Do you just like shake it off? Do you take a day off of work and just feel sorry for yourself? Do you?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like, I'm a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo, and I can tell you at Taekwondo, I was like on the spar, like I needed to hit some things.
Yeah. Because I think
Eating
that
and drinking wine.
Drinking wine?
It was like, yeah.
we don't really talk in our curriculum of how to deal with disappointment, or how to deal with rejection, or how to deal with a lot of the heavy emotional labor that you do as a reporter, as a journalist. I mean, I can think of stories I covered where I had to do like a house fire and things like that, and I was not prepared because we never talked about that in my journalism classes. So, do you have ways to cope with a bad day at work?
I just try to leave it at work.
Leave it at work. Okay.
That's the main thing is, when I was younger, I would work 80-hour weeks because I didn't really have anything else to do. So it's that making sure you have activities to do outside of work, and keep, your work is work, your life is your life. Don't let them get too mixed. Because if you put all of yourself into your work, that's hard, because editors are going to change your writing. You can't take that personally. That's work. Stories are going to get killed. It's not personal, it's work. And if you put too much of your personal self into your work, it can feel like those are personal affronts and can really get you down. So that's what I would say is make sure you have a good, healthy personal life outside of work that you can then go and blow off steam and do other things and make sure that you're keeping perspective.
Before you moved back to Kansas, why'd you leave National Geographic to come here?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So she asked why I left National Geographic. Kind of two reasons. The professional reason was I left in mid-2010. So after the recession in 2008, that hit the publishing industry pretty hard. And I would say even before then, when I started at the magazine, there were 25 people on staff in my department. When I left in 2010, it was down to 10 people, and now it is 4 people staff. And I'm still working for them freelance. So when I left, I was 39 years old and a single mom by choice. So I had a kid that was 3. I was the only person paying for him. Washington, D.C. is a really expensive city. The publishing industry, was just kind of constricting. It was getting tighter and tighter. I could kind of see the writing on the wall where I felt like my job was safe at least for another 10 years or so. But I didn't want to be 50 years old, laid off, and having to look for a new job. And I had a very kind of, at National Geographic, what I did was a very narrow skill set. And so I thought, now's the time to leave when I can leave on my own terms. And I'm not 50, I'm almost 40. I mean, that huge difference when you're looking for a job makes a big difference. And I can kind of set my own parameters. So it actually took me about a year to find a job from the time I made the decision to start looking before I finally found one and moved back. But yeah, so that was why I left Geographic. I didn't want to leave writing and editing completely, but I knew I had to take kind of a different tack. And so that's why the foundation, I think, was, it was good for me, because not only do I do the writing and editing for that, but I also then write fundraising proposals. So I'm kind of completely two different forms of writing. And the cost of living of raising a kid here is so much better than DC.
Probably quality of life too.
And yeah, quality of life. I mean, seriously, I lived 6 miles from my office, straight shot one street, and it could take me an hour and a half to drive from my condo to my office. And the metro took about 40 minutes. So I laugh when people complain about traffic getting like that.
Tim, do you have a story that you feel like you still have a connection to?
Oh yeah, tons. The winter of 2014, into 2015, Hutchinson had I want to say 30 major double alarm fires. That means not only did the firemen get called out, but a second relief crew got called out. A lot of that had to do with the fact that the housing stock in Hutchinson it's all rentals, they're poorly maintained, so people are using space heaters to stay warm. Those things, don't use space heaters, they're very, very bad. Don't do them. Anyway, basically the whole town was on fire. And so I was, the evening breaking news reporter at that point, covering lots and lots of fires. And so I finally got to know the fire chief and the different battalion chiefs really well. So we started looking at stories as to why this is happening and what people can do to fix that. So that was one that I really kind of came into my own as a reporter, because not only was I covering this breaking news, but I was seeing a correlation, and so we did some bigger stories on it. But more recently, I think everybody's seen this story in about a billion different forms. We all knew it was coming at some point. We just didn't know exactly how that was going to play out. So Coach Snyder retired on December 2nd, I think. The magazine went out 2 weeks prior to that, the winter issue. So it was arriving in people's mailboxes, right before he retired. And I'm thinking, well, I know for a fact this is going to be the cover. I know for a fact that a lot of people are going to have a lot of opinions about this. So we're going to have to be very careful as to how we report it. And I also know it's coming out in March, several months after he retired. So there's likely a chance that we'll also have a new football coach we're introducing. So now you're juggling all these sensitivities. And how do you tell that story in a way that's, worth reading 3 months down the road, still interesting enough that you'll want to read it, and checks off all the boxes of people on campus that I still need to talk to later on in life.
Oh, yeah.
So what we ended up doing is we put him on the cover. I saw this photo that a JMC student, Cooper Kinley, took for K-State Athletics, and I knew immediately this was the photo. This was, it's Bill Snyder Family Stadium, all dark except for the video boards lit up saying "Thank you, Coach." And I went out there, I drove out there after I saw the Facebook post just to see it for myself and make sure that was the thing, that was the image. And then I immediately started my quest to get that photo. Our publisher said when Coach Snyder, if and when he finally retires, we wouldn't put him on the cover of the magazine because he'd already retired once and we'd already put him on the cover. And I said, well, maybe, but this is the biggest news of the year. You know, last year I said Hale Library was going to be the biggest news of the year, and it would be the biggest news of the next year. Well, I didn't anticipate Coach Snyder retiring. So I knew we needed him on the cover, but I knew we couldn't have his picture on the cover because, anyway. So we got this image, and we decided what we would do is rather than put too much emphasis or onus on Coach, we would kind of give you just a short summary of what he did over his time here at K-State, and then show a picture of happier times, so a full stadium. And then on the second 2 pages, we gathered quotes from football blue bloods around the world of football, and also his former players, because those are the folks that matter the most to him. Just minimal photos. So we kind of told the story without telling the story. We let other people tell the story for us.
How do you cultivate sources? I guess this is a question for all of you, but have you ever decided to not name a source, and what goes into that decision?
Well, for me, as the Middle East editor at Geographic, I traveled around the Middle East a lot and met up with people, but also just went to a lot of, I was fortunate in Washington, D.C., there are a lot of different think tanks and universities and institutions that would hold guest speakers or conferences, so I went to those, got to know the people. And so really it's just, meeting the right people and then keeping up a relationship with them, because you want them to trust you so that they'll give you information. There have been times, I guess, well, in the story that ended up not running, we did use pseudonyms in a couple places because people were afraid that they would be arrested by the government and imprisoned. So of course we weren't going to run their real names if they were going to be in prison.
How do you guys, and so you just started, right? And so how do you cultivate sources?
Well, that's one of the areas of breaking news that is helpful to a new reporter, because when you're new to a city, new to a beat, new to a position, you don't know very many people. But as a breaking news reporter, many of the people you're talking to, it's their job to talk to you. So when you go to a fatal crash and the sheriff's spokesperson is speaking with you, that's their job. You're now meeting the person who you're going to have to work with every other time. You're not trying to find somebody to meet you in the parking garage at night. Or if K-State does something, you're speaking with their spokesperson. Or if you're going to a courtroom to cover a case, the victim's family is there. Sometimes they'll want to speak, sometimes they don't. The worst they can do is say no. So you have to go up to the people, you have to ask them, introduce who you are. It's great to have a business card and just say, hey, I know that your pets just died in this house fire, and you might not want to talk right now, especially on camera. But here's my card. If you want to call me, you can. So as a breaking news reporter, that's so much more helpful. When I was in a small town, my first job, it was different in that when I would go to the city council meeting, one of the city council women was the wife of the police chief, who I would talk to for police stories, and their son was one of the stars on the football team, and I would talk to their coach. So everybody is a lot more connected. It's easier to meet people, but you also have to be more careful about how you are around them, because some things are just a little bit different there.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Great. Do you have good tips for cultivating sources?
Well, I think it's just, do a good job and be professional. If you can show somebody that maybe might be a little unsure that you're going to handle their story with care and professionalism, they're more likely to come back to you with something later. That's something I've always tried to do, especially when I'm covering stories out of my depth. If I'm writing about something that I'm not particularly familiar with, so a topic that I just literally know nothing about, I disclose that. I say, I know very little to nothing about this, so I need you to talk in the simplest terms, or a lot of time if I'm doing a science research story, I tell people, our readers aren't going to understand the high level thing. So is there an analogy we can use to explain this? Or what is the key takeaway that I need to let people know after they've read this story? And I think that really helps people go into a different frame of mind so they can talk to you about something that might be high level or very niche to a layperson or somebody that has very little background in an issue, especially issues that kind of high sensitivity. So anything about like diversity and inclusion, anything about like the Me Too movement, any of those types of stories I've ever had to write, I just go into it saying, like I'm a white dude from Kansas, I know nothing about what you're talking about, so keep that in mind. I apologize, so please help me learn.
This
What's that?
question. Oh yeah, go for
Have
it.
any of you guys ever been like threatened by someone, or just had like your life in danger when reporting a story, or anything scary, or anything like that?
I've definitely made some people in Hutchinson and Western Kansas upset because they didn't want their name in the paper after they got in an accident, or they wanted their issue told from only their side, right? A Walmart was being built in Ellsworth, Kansas a couple of years ago, and the whole town seemed to be pretty upset about it. But as I'm going around town trying to, gather some color for the story and just hear what people have to say, I think I talked to a few people that absolutely the rest of the community did not want me to talk to because they had a differing opinion. And some people came up to me after the fact and said, don't quote them. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I've never felt like my life was threatened or stuff, but yeah, you definitely make some people not happy with your reporting, but that's kind of our job though too. I mean, as a journalist, your job is to tell the truth, tell what is happening, and not everyone's going to agree with everything that you write. Covering the Middle East, especially when we did Israeli-Palestinian stories, I always said we succeeded if we got an equal amount of hate mail from both sides.
What did the hate mail say? I mean, was it eloquent? Was it
Oh,
like
you would get
trolls on the
both.
internet?
You
Oh.
would get, yeah. Or, and we got our share of anytime reference to Holocaust and any type of, or, you get the Holocaust denier, you get some hateful people. And you just ignore them. People that actually are trying to make, ask a sincere question of why did you cover it this way or why did you say this, we would respond to with sources and information if we felt like they actually were curious. But if they were just being xenophobic or racist or hateful, we just ignore them.
I cover crime. I have not gotten any death threats, thankfully.
Oh, good.
And I go to crime scenes, and typically at night, and it doesn't feel the safest. But there are police officers there, so you always make sure to park as close to police, stay around them. I have had colleagues get death threats when reporting on stories, and their editors have made them report it to police. It hasn't happened often, but it has happened before. And I've been less scared for my own safety than I have been scared about upsetting people, which is a difficult thing because you don't want to get yelled at for a story that you wrote. When I was a student here and the editor at the Collegian, one of my reporters wrote a story about the Lilly statue in the Union. And it had the price that was paid by a donor to make the statue. We didn't say that's a good thing or a bad thing or it's too much. We had no opinion about it. We just wanted to say this is how much the statue was. And we got a call from somebody with the union who was not upset, who was not happy with it and was very upset. And that was just a difficult situation to deal with as a young journalist. So you may have to experience that even as a student and have to figure out how to deal with it and have to speak with your advisors and your teachers about what to do.
Since we're kind of on the topic of ethics, one of the questions you guys asked I thought was great was, do you use Twitter to do breaking news, or how do you decide what the right platform is for news that might tell someone, hey, a neighbor of yours died in a house fire, or how have you navigated the new rules of journalism since the beginning of social media?
Well, I think for me it's a little more isolated because we're a quarterly magazine and we cover things from kind of a more favorable to the university approach.
I was going to say, this is probably more your question than.
So I use Twitter every day. I tweet about more things than I write about because not everything rises to the level of a story. With names, I'm not sure if we've ever named somebody until it has been official. So like with that swatting case where a police officer shot and killed a man, the name started getting out in the public. It was not confirmed by police. We did not use it, even though it was making its way around. We eventually did use it when that officer testified in court that he was the person who fired the shot. So at that point we used it because it became public record. I have had other cases where I'm reading the affidavit and it has the name or the initials of the victim or the name of a police officer involved in a shooting, and we have to decide whether or not to use it. And that's where editors come help. Yesterday there was a fatal crash in Wichita, 3 people died, and that's where police, they almost never release a name. I don't think they ever release a name until they have notified family. So it eventually was put on the crash report. That's public record at that point. So we used the name then, but yes, some family members might not have found out already. So it's a difficult situation.
So for us at the foundation, really all we run into ethics-wise is confidentiality with our donors. When they give a gift, they sign what's called a memorandum of understanding, and those are not public information. So it's really up to the donor to say, yes, you can use my name, and yes, you can use the amount of the gift. So some donors say, yeah, you can say my name, but not the amount. Some say, yeah, you can say the amount, but not my name. And so we honor those because for us, I mean, it's not breaking news. It's a feature. It's a feel-good. It's human interest story type stuff. So in that case, it doesn't really matter.
Good. Do we have other questions we want to ask them? Anything that's come up?
I'm going to ask, have you ever reported a story that made you emotional, like almost to the point of crying?
I'm rather stoic, but one of the most difficult stories I worked on, again, it was about 3 years worth of research and editing and stuff, was at National Geographic. We did a story on human trafficking and actually talking to some people that had been trafficked and the situations that they had gone through was pretty heartrending.
I didn't write a story on it, but I read the police affidavit planning to write a story on it. The former NFL running back Joseph Randall, who was with the Cowboys and is from Wichita, he was arrested on suspicion of rape. I read the affidavit, talked with my editor about it, and it was not going to do anybody any good to publish that story. We had published that he had been arrested, and that he had been arrested for on suspicion of other crimes, but nobody needed to know the details of that crime. People do need to know it, but we did not need to publish a story that says this is what he allegedly did to his girlfriend and the mother of his child, because people will know who that is. They will know who she is. Generally in journalism, we don't identify the victim of sex crimes unless if they are coming out to tell their story themselves. And in that case, people would have been able to identify her. And after reading it, I couldn't sleep that night.
I'm just kind of jaded. Like, like, those things don't faze me.
She
Again-
says still awake, you say jaded, yeah, so.
Again, this is why it's good to have a healthy little personal life
Yeah.
outside of work, because sometimes you just need to like be able to go blow off steam or,
Shut it down and go
you know,
not think about it.
go give your kid a hug and be like, okay, there is humanity in the world. Because yeah, some days are just shit. So,
I guess that's the best way to put it.
yeah.
Cool. One more question? We can also end on that note, because it's true, and, yeah.
No, but on a happier note. Okay, so I'm just gonna put in a quick plug. As a writer and as an editor, one of my big things is always keep in mind when you're writing an article, what is the purpose of the article, and keep your reader as your target audience. Like, who's your target audience? Because lots of times you'll go out and you'll collect information and you'll have some really good information, but if it's not the purpose of the article, or if it doesn't strengthen the article or put forward your thesis, or if the reader's going to be like, why would I care about this, then don't include that. Always keep in mind the reader and the purpose of the article.
Right, fantastic.
The best thing you can do is get involved with student media,
Good. That's
as
good
many of
point.
them as you can. Even if you think you're going to be a PR professional, a writer, an on-camera talent, the camera worker, many jobs you'll have to do all of that. I have to shoot video myself at the scene, I have to edit it, I have to write the story, I have to put it online.
You have to tweet about it. you
Right,
have
right.
to-
I mean, and if you're thinking you're going to go into PR, the public relations specialists, they will shoot video, they will be the on-screen talent. They will be writing press releases. They will be using social media. So all of those are skills you need to learn. You might specialize in one. I don't pretend that video is my specialty. All I do is point, press the button, and then edit it down into a smaller form. I am not going to win any video awards, but I can do it, and you need to be able to do all of it.
I'd say just find something that you can make yourself indispensable for. Even if it's not your primary task. If people know you are great at doing number stories, that's great. If they know you are great at doing like a history story, looking at context and background of stuff, great with research. Get good at that. If you are great at breaking news, you know, be that known, make it known.
Yeah, definitely read a lot. Be well read. You have to know a little bit about everything. And then if there's something that you're particularly interested in, like if you really like science and medicine or whatever, you could be a medical writer, that kind of thing. But yeah, I agree with Tim. No, hone a good skill. Like if you have a second language, or yeah, if you're interested in science or whatever, make that your thing. But also know a little bit about everything. And have good, I'm a researcher, have good research skills, know where to find the correct information, and know what correct information actually looks like. Like Wikipedia is not correct information. Know good sources.
And it's okay to say I don't understand about something. Like if you're not grasping the concept, you can't communicate. So
That's a great place to end, I think. So can we give them all a round of applause? And they brought copies of some of the publications that they work for. Please take some as you leave. I think that you can read things on the internet a lot, but if you want to look at design, you want to look at photography, and just layout, it's always good to have a few benchmarks to see how that's done well. And for Thursday after spring break, we're going to have our strategic communications panel. And I will go ahead and finish the names and titles for that as soon as I have those firmed up with our guests. But thank you, and I'll have a great spring break. I'll see you next Thursday. Thank you. Yeah, we're right next to
oh yeah, didn't you say you were going to order the time on that?
Yeah, just like Sarah, so she's getting internships this summer. She may come up here, she does that.
We have
But, so I'm trying to hire another student writer to like, put them on the ropes for the rest of the semester, and then we'll grad writing in the summer. Sarah's gone. So we had one yesterday, she was awesome. Today, so she's gonna be pretty good, but I have a tough choice.
Ooh, that's always not a bad thing.
No.
Yeah.
Well, if
Great.
the first one doesn't pan out, you can always try the second one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you guys. Yeah. Thanks for being such a good panel and having good questions. Or good, I'm just so amazed that everyone is different, even though, I mean, you guys have been on a panel before, but we didn't talk about a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Try not to tell the same story twice.
Try
Yeah.
to.
Well, I'm the only one that would notice. So, yeah. Works out great.
And we all do different things.
Yeah.
Experiences. So.
Yeah, totally. Well, don't forget your mugs. And do you want me to keep what you brought so that I can give it to students?
All the K-Staters left. I knew they would. Not ours.
Oh.
If you want. If you don't want, that's fine too. It's not hurt my feelings.
Sure, I'll take it.
Okay.
How's your donor story on